Good evening all and welcome. Be forewarned, tonight tackles some particularly dark topics. Quite strong stuff. So if you aren't of the constitution to carry on, feel free to leave now. Tonight we have a particularly nasty set of stories with Miss Fearsome, our collaborator for tonight. If you enjoy her narrations, feel free to check out her channel. A link, of course, is in the description, and you'll be able to click on it at the end too on screen. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My sophomore year of high school, my friend was murdered. Going back freshman year when I was in homeroom, I became friends with the girl who sat in front of me. Her name was Diana Wright. We came from the same neighborhood and both worked at pizza shops a few blocks away. One night I remember she texted me, asking if I wanted to do something. This was before everyone had unlimited cell phone plans, and I had a Nokia that was basically a brick. I had to pay for minutes that we used to text, and if it was short, we could get away with not having to open it, and therefore being charged the 0.5 minute. She told me that she had a flight with her mum and felt like going out to smoke some weed. I had work and wouldn't be done until 1 a.m. Since I needed gas money, I told her I couldn't blow off work but might come afterwards. She sighed and said okay, and to text her when I was done with work to see where she was at because she didn't decide what she was going to do yet. At 1:15 I messaged her but didn't get a reply. No big deal. I thought she probably was asleep. I texted Saturday, and I met with nothing. Sunday, nothing. Again, I thought she was probably grounded. That's why she was mad to begin with. She was grounded, and went out, got grounded again, left, went out again. Monday, I come into school and hear our teacher making an announcement. We're sorry to inform you guys, but Diana is missing. Her family has reported her missing. She left and went out and never came home, the teacher said, and my stomach dropped. My fingers tingled and I couldn't believe it. Apparently the night she ended up hanging out with the guy who she met working at the pizza shop. Everything was going all right. She was a beautiful girl, she was a model, so we knew what he was thinking. We aren't sure in what order things went down. Turns out she was drugged, raped, and strangled. Then her vile murderer decided to cut her body into pieces and put her in a steel drum and set her on fire for good measure. I think about that night over and over. Should I have gone? Would it have really made a difference? Or would he have just killed both of us? Her father was an FBI agent, so it truly goes to show that if someone is evil and they want to kill you, then nothing, and I mean not a thing, will get in their way. Lamar Hames, please, let's never meet.
This all took place back in November of last year, when I booked an entire trip in order to propose to my then girlfriend. I flew us both out to Florida to visit Disney World, the last concert of one of our favourite bands, and of course propose. We had a blast, and I proposed in the Disney castle. She said yes and everything went well. We then took off the next morning, which was Thanksgiving Day, connecting through San Francisco on the way. About 30 minutes into the flight, the captain came on the intercom and announced that one of the engines wasn't depressurizing properly. So we had to do a loop back to the airport, get off, and wait in the terminal building for another plane to be readied. However, when we got to the terminal, my now fiancée switched her phone on from airplane mode, and within a minute she had 10 plus voicemails, all from the same number, which she didn't recognize. Fearing the worst, we called the number without listening to any of the voicemails. I knew something was wrong as soon as she started talking to them, as her face went blank and she didn't say a word. I told her to give me the phone and she did. I asked who it was, and the voice I heard on the other end just sounded dead, with absolutely no hint of emotion to it. All he said was, "I will kill you both as soon as you land in Seattle." I asked who he was again, but he just hung up. She said she had no idea who it was, and I certainly didn't know the voice. I called him back and he would answer, but he'd just repeat our landing time back to us, not realizing we were delayed. Now, I used to work in telecom, so I pulled some strings to get a name and address from the phone number that he was using. Neither of us knew the name or the address, and my fiancée looked him up on Facebook, where she had one mutual friend with him, her ex-best friend, who we'll call Karen. They weren't friends anymore because she'd gotten wrapped up in heavy drug usage and stolen from my fiancé. But anyway, we did a little more digging and found out he was the boyfriend of Karen's new best friend. My theory is, Karen saw all the posts that my fiancé was putting up on social media about the trip, the engagement, and the great time we were having, and she was pissed and wanted to piss on our parade. I didn't take it as a joke, however. A death threat is a death threat, and in my mind as meth heads they could follow through with it on a whim. I called him up, talking over his ramblings, and told him that I was armed, knew where he lived, and was not afraid to take things into my own hands. He hung up on me, so I called the Seattle area law enforcement, and they told me to call back on a non-holiday. WTF? So I called the emergency line, and they reiterated the same statement. We were on our own. We ended up flying in close to 9 hours after our original arrival time, and once we'd landed and checked our phones, we both had a single voicemail. Hers, I assumed, was from the guy, and mine I had no idea, as he hadn't been calling my phone. My voicemail was from my dad, who said he had gotten a call from my neighbours saying that my mailbox had been destroyed, looking like it had been hit by a car and the mail stolen from it. Her voicemail, however, was the guy screaming, "Where were you? How dare you?" and so on, with random yelling thrown in. I drove home and dropped off my fiancée at her house, insisting she not come with me to my place, in case there was someone still there. Arriving home, I could see that they had thrown a brick through my window, with an old picture of my fiancé and Karen attached to it. I tried calling him, but there was no answer. I went to bed after covering up the window with a tarp and making sure my fiancé was okay. I then filed a police report the next day, and they said I couldn't do anything without having actually seen them on my property. So we blocked everyone involved on all social media and went about our lives. I then didn't hear from him for 3 weeks, when he sent me a picture of my fiancée working. I immediately called her and told her to go into the back room of her work, which was a bubble tea shop. Then I called mail security and explained the situation. But by the time they'd gotten to the food court, where the picture was taken from, he was gone. At this point I was done messing around. I knew his address, and swung by and dropped off a note attached to a critical defense .40 bullet which read, "This is your last chance to leave her alone. This is your only warning. It's been almost 9 months now, and we haven't heard a word or seen them again. But for both of our sakes, I sincerely hope not to meet you, Tyler."
So there was this guy I found in a chat room when I was 12. This guy's name was Mike. I don't remember the last name. He lived in California. Mike apparently had a thing for younger girls, and was well aware of how old I was. Mike claimed he was only in his 20s, and since it was Yahoo, there was an icon indicating I had a webcam. Mike wanted me to send him dirty pictures of myself in return for pics of himself, and asked for my number. Being that I was 12 and wanted attention from guys, I didn't think anything of it at the time. Then things started to get even weirder. He would send me pics, never of his face. Mike told me he was willing to get a job down there, move, and pretend to be my mother's boyfriend. He revealed that he was actually not 20, but between 36 and 40. This was over the phone, I told him this was too much, and so he began to ask me to do things to myself over the phone. I was afraid he possibly knew where I lived and was scared to tell my mum what I had gotten myself into. Then something happened that ended Mike's perverted calls. Being as this happened 20 years ago, there was still dial-up, and while I had a phone in my room, there was a phone still in the living room and my mother's room. Mike would usually call around 3:30 when I was getting home from school, because my mother worked an hour away, and he knew she wouldn't be home until closer to 5. Well, he called, and I answered, and my mum ended up coming home early and needed to use the phone. I didn't tell her I was already on it. She picked up the phone and heard the things he was saying to me. All she said was, "Excuse me, who is this? You do realize the girl you're talking to is 12? He hung up immediately and never called back. Mike, I hope no one else has had to deal with your sick behind, and that we never meet.
This happened years ago, when I decided to go online and start looking for new friends. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was harmless. I could find people around the country to chat with, learn about some other cultures and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't give out personal information about myself. No phone numbers, addresses, any of that. I wasn't stupid. I made a simple profile, stated what kind of friends I was interested in making, just basic stuff like that. And after about a month, I received a message from a man. I don't remember it word for word, but it basically said, "Hi, I found your profile and I'm super interested in being friends." He then stated that he lived in the same state as me. Though I know maybe it was rude to be snobby about someone in my state contacting me, I did politely say on my profile that I was trying to make some pen pals outside of the US. I responded politely though, and I replied to a few of his messages for a while. I found out that he lived in the same city as me. "I see you like anime. I love anime. I also see you've been to Japan. I've been to Japan too. Do you go to anime conventions? Maybe we could go together to the next convention that comes to town." I felt a little uncomfortable with this. I put right on my page that I have no intention to meet up with anyone, just have an online pen pal. So I politely told him that, but he didn't like it. I just thought we could be friends, since we have similar interests. I again politely told him that I wasn't interested in meeting anyone in person from the website. He pretended to be fine with it and went right back to rambling about his interests. I logged out of the website for a few days and just focused on my personal life, going to work and doing schoolwork, and taking care of my disabled father. When one day I woke up to notifications on multiple of my instant messenger apps, all stating basically the same thing. "Hey, it's John from the Penpal website." He'd messaged me on like 4 of my chat apps, which I did not give him. How did he find them? I was really annoyed, so as politely as I could, I messaged him on the Penpal website. "Hey, so I don't know how you found my IDs for my chat apps, but that was kinda over the line. That wasn't really appropriate. Not one app, but you messaged me on like 4. I'm sorry, but I really wanted to talk to you, and you haven't been on the website for a few days. That doesn't make it okay. I also have a personal life and a job, and I have to take care of my family. I can't spend all my time on here. That's why I messaged you on all those other apps," he said. "I don't have them listed on my profile. How did you even find them?" He avoided the subject. "I'm sorry that I did that. I'm just trying to be your friend. I just want to be friends with you." "Well, this isn't the way to do it. I'm very uncomfortable that you somehow found that information that I didn't give to you. I don't think we should talk anymore. I don't want to be friends with you. I'm sorry. Please do not contact me again." I immediately blocked him on all of those apps and on the Penpal website. For a few months everything was fine, when suddenly I got a message on one of the apps, and the user wasn't in my friends list. The message was as follows: "You stupid, fat, ugly bitch. No one will ever love you. You'll never find a man to love you. You're so fat and ugly. Why don't you just kill yourself, bitch? Do the world a favor." I rolled my eyes and blocked the account. Throughout the course of a year, every few months, across my multiple social media platforms, I was being harassed. I had completely forgotten about the man, until I received a message on the Pen Pal website. The account didn't have a name or photos, it was just a random username. The message I received was the same nonsense as before, calling me fat and ugly, saying I'm a bitch, and telling me I should die. Once I got the message on that website, I knew it had to be him. I'd had no other issues with anyone else. I replied, saying that guy's name, telling him I knew it was him, and that his behaviour is really sad and pathetic. I just wanted to be your friend, you bitch. Watch your back. Then the account blocked me. For a few more months, nothing really happened. I got 1 or 2 messages from fake accounts again, but I had grown used to it and just immediately blocked them. Then one day I received a Facebook message from a police officer. He was contacting me about a profile I'd apparently made on a website called Ashley Madison. It was used for people to have affairs, hookups, etc. Now I had never heard of it before then, and absolutely did not have an account there. I had a long talk with him, where he told me his department investigates human trafficking, and thought I was an underage girl, possibly in danger. It had my personal Facebook account listed on the profile, as well as other ways to contact me. I was in shock. He advised me to contact the website and ask them to take down the profile, but said to me, "You seem like a sweet girl. I don't know who you pissed off, but don't read the profile." My curiosity got the better of me, but I should have taken his advice. Using some of my normal selfies, an account was made, and the profile stated a lot of horrible things, very derogatory. It made me sick to my stomach to read some of the things it said I apparently wanted to have done to me. Thankfully, the website took quick action to take down the profile. The next time I got one of those hate messages online, I snapped. I didn't hold back, cursing him out for being so immature and disgusting because someone simply didn't want to be his friend. The account blocked me without answering. I didn't get a message from any accounts for a while, when one day I was the closer at work, and I was waiting outside for a family member to pick me up. As I was listening to music, waving goodbye to my manager as they drove off, I got a notification on one of my apps. "You ugly bitch," it said. I sighed, rolling my eyes as I opened the message. As I was typing, another message came in that made me stop typing and freeze up. "You're all alone now. I could kill you right now if I wanted to. No one would ever find you." I backed up against the building. I didn't have keys, only the manager did, who just left. I looked around through the parking lot, not a car in sight. The streetlights shined dimly around me. My heart started to race as more messages came in. "You're so ugly, you know that. No one would ever fall in love with you. Your family probably won't even miss you. You disgusting bitch. I should just kill you right now." I started to cry, the phone shaking in my hands. Just as another text came in, a car pulled up in front of me. It was my family member, coming to pick me up. I took a deep breath and quickly got into the car. "Sorry, am I late? I got stuck at 2 red lights. Your manager already left? They just left you alone out here." "Just drive," I accidentally screamed at them, tears streaming down my face. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" I was crying, shaking. They took my phone and looked at it, seeing the messages. "Who the hell is this texting you?" "I don't know who it is. Please, just drive. I want to get out of here." We went back to their place and they wanted to call the police, but I told them not to. I had no idea who this person was or where to find them. Instead, they called another family member who works in the IT field. After they heard the whole story, everything I've endured for almost 2 years, they told me I should have made new accounts from the beginning of this harassment. I listened to them, and right then and there I made new accounts on all my social media. I worked at that job for another month, but my family member had told my manager what happened, so I was never put on closing shifts again. I was only given morning shifts, where I clicked out of work when the sun was still out. But I still didn't feel safe, as they knew where I worked. My manager understood when I quit. All the harassment stopped, and to this day I still haven't received any more of those messages. Now I'm married, I still live in this city, and I don't live in that neighborhood anymore. I feel comfortable, and I don't feel afraid that this person will find me and stalk me again. But even now, any time I get a random message from someone who isn't on my friends list, my heart races for a second.
I live in a commercial building in a pretty conservative country. Underneath our flat, there's a dental office, and the owner is on pretty good terms with my parents. So my dad arranged for my front teeth to be pushed back without braces, as they are just mildly outwards, not too much. So the owner's head dentist decides to do it with retainers. Since I live in the building, I usually go after all his usual appointments are done, so that I don't have to book appointments in advance, and he can see me for a longer time. I usually went with a guardian or someone from my dad's office, which happened to be just one floor above our own apartment. But on this particular day, everyone was busy. Usually a female dentist used to see me, but today was only the head dentist. Not even the receptionist was there. The entire place was empty, and it was around 9 p.m. I was alone with this guy. So I know this guy can be a little touchy-touchy with other dentists, but he hadn't tried anything with me, so I didn't think to myself I'd be in any danger. But for some reason, as soon as I entered the room, I felt a certain uneasiness. I can't quite explain it. He is super trustworthy, as he is this ultra-religious person, and my parents knew him and stuff. And I'm in my building. What's the worst that could happen, right? Anyway, so I go in, he's tightening up my retainer and checking if it's fixed, when I feel him pushing his penis against my leg. I am like, what the hell's going on? And thought maybe he didn't realize it, but then he changes his position in the chair and starts doing more and more of it, until he's almost on top of me, as he tries to check my teeth. At that moment I was scared, because it occurred to me that I am completely alone here, so no one could hear me scream, and he had dental stuff in my mouth that weren't letting me talk or scream. The entire time I was just trying to move away from the position, but he wasn't letting me, and then finally when he goes away, I just said goodbye and left. Now, as I said, this was a very conservative country. You don't really talk to your parents about anything sexual, and I had to learn about the birds and the bees online. So when my dad asked me why I didn't want to go for my next session, I couldn't say anything aside that I was uncomfortable with the male dentist. I think he understood what I meant, so he never sent me down there again, and I still have outward teeth because I'm traumatized and creeped the hell out.
I'm 22 now, so this has been done with for 10 years. I was in middle school at the time, and had my own phone due to my parents not getting off of work for another 2 to 3 hours once I'd arrived home from school. I was at my aunt's one Saturday night, and got an explicit text from an unknown number. I told my aunt and she texted the number back, writing that I was an underage child and to stop sending messages. No more messages came through that night, and the next day I was at Sunday dinner with my mother, stepfather at the time. He has now adopted me when my daughter was born, and my grandparents. My grandpa was chief of police at the time, and I got another image from the unknown number. I told my grandpa and parents immediately about the pictures, and that the text would read things like, "Go let your dogs out so I can see you," or "Have a good day and ride on the bus." And the text would be at times when I was walking to the bus stop. All my family said was to not text back and he would stop, so I did. Now at my middle school, we had 3 different sections that each grade would sit in until our classes started. The 3 grades, 6th, 7th and 8th, were split up. One in the cafeteria, one in the basketball gymnasium, and one in the auditorium. Monday morning came, and I was sitting with my childhood best friend, and my phone wouldn't stop going off. I mean, this person was sending so many messages, he'd completely broken my phone, to the point where I couldn't even turn the ringer off. I finally asked my friend to go with me to speak to the officer who worked at our school, and I was completely terrified my mother was going to whoop my ass because I was going to the SRO about it. But I knew if I didn't, I would get in trouble for my phone chiming out due to the thousands of pictures coming through. The SRO brought me and my friend into the conference room and began to ask what was going on. I still remember the picture exactly. It was a man sitting in the bathtub, with the camera facing the faucet, showing a blurry image of his face. The SRO asked my friend to leave, but I requested she stayed, and he asked if I had ever sent explicit pictures back. The answer was no. I was an awkward 12-year-old going through the most horrifying emo stage ever. He called my mother and she said they could take the phone for investigation, and I remember his exact words were, when trying to just get one text message to open without any more coming through, he said, "Good Lord, this man is just embarrassing himself." They ended up finding the guy's phone in a trash can at the man's house. He had 2 daughters, one 12 and another 6, and he told his neighbor he was throwing the phone away because his 12-year-old daughter was getting harassed by a man over text messages. He ended up spending less than 6 months in jail and got out early due to his wife needing him because she was handicapped. He never had to register as a sex offender either. I remember after he'd gotten arrested that in the news report it said he'd sent me over 3,000 messages from Saturday night to Monday afternoon when the cops finally took the phone. So to the man who made my middle school year a living hell, let's never meet.
I've always had my demons, just like anyone else. And just like everyone else, I've had to find ways to cope with my problems. Some people work out, some people get counseling. Some people narrate scary stories on YouTube. My crutch was alcohol. I would get so plastered that I would wake up in random places and not know how I got there. I ended up in the drunk tank more than once and had my license suspended, but I guess that's not relevant. Basically, I had a lot of problems with alcohol. I was at another party getting plastered drunk as usual, and had been talking to this girl for a few hours. Well, more like making out and drinking with this girl for a few hours. She was around my age, in her early 20s, skinny, and had dark circles around her eyes. It looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, but my drunk self thought she was the hottest girl I'd ever seen. The party had died down. Everyone was starting to leave. So the girls said, "If you want to keep going, I know a good place to get wrecked." She might as well have said I'd won $1 million, and I agreed, and we left. After 10 minutes of driving, she took me to this run-down house in the downtown area of our small town. My wasted self didn't think twice about the shape of the house. I didn't know I was about to make the worst mistake of my life. We left the car and entered it, and I immediately knew this was a trap house. You could tell by the broken glass on the floor, needles on the counter, closed blinds, and a haze of smoke in the air. Of God knows what. And for some reason I saw no problem with all of this. My goal of the night was to get blackout drunk. So the girl I was with walked to the fridge and grabbed 2 coolers, a twisted tea, and we shotgunned them, getting cheap liquor everywhere. At this point, I was really hammered, and told her I needed to sit down. She led me over to the couch, and we started making out. A little way through it, she asked me if I'd ever tried coke. I had, and she asked if I wanted to try some. Not wanting to look like a wuss, I said I did, which would turn out to be the worst decision of my life. She went into her room and came back with a little bag of whitish-brown powder. I should have known then it wasn't what I was expecting, but in my highly intoxicated brain I didn't really notice. She put 2 little lines on the table, rolled up a 20, and handed it to me saying, "Ladies first." We both laughed. It was a situation like 2 friends sharing a cold beer. I bent down and took the whole line trying to impress her, and 2 seconds later fell back. This was not coke. This was something no person should ever feel. It was the most powerful high I'd ever felt. There are no words to truly describe what happened. My vision faded to black, and then exploded into a mess of lights. After a few seconds when the light faded, I woke up in my childhood house in my bed and flew into my closet from the kitchen sink. There was a massive fighting arena. I had boxing gloves on and was fighting a monkey demon with tire arms. It morphed into my mother, who said I was a disappointment for not graduating in mechanics class, and punched me in the face and sent me down to hell. After a few hours of crying, I was really messed up. It was disgusting, horrifying, the stuff I saw. I woke up the next day on the floor, half covered in vomit, still feeling really messed up. I ran to her sink and threw up at least 5 times. She casually walked out of her room and gave me a smirk. What a rough night. Like, what she put me through was funny. After I was done emptying my stomach, I screamed at her. She just laughed. Pretty intense, right? It's Fade. For your information, Fade is a substance that is very common in my town, composed of both meth and heroin. She said that, and I really had to hold back the urge to swing at her. I ran out the house without listening to anything else she had to say and called a cab a few blocks away. After doing some research, what I experienced was called nodding out. It's common to see visuals when nodding out, and it's pretty much the point before overdosing. To be honest, I'm not sure how I didn't die that night. But needless to say, from that day forth, I never drank again. And after months of therapy, and a newfound fear of leaving my house, I am recovering. Please don't dabble in drugs, or even overdrink. You never know how badly it can spiral. And to the junkie that ruined my life and slipped me into hard drugs, let's not meet again.
This happened to one of my best friends and I back in 2017, and I feel like it's worth sharing. Some backstory. My best friend, Elise, was dating this guy Mark in 2016. They broke up just as the new year was approaching, and I've known Elise for over a decade, but we didn't talk a lot while she was dating Mark. I ran into them once at a local coffee shop, and happy to see her, I gave her a hug and we started having a quick catch-up chat. However, the whole time, Mark was staring at me in disgust, as if Elise wasn't allowed to talk to her friends. At the time I thought nothing of it, assuming he was just antisocial. But I had no idea he would go on to ruin an entire year of my life. It's really fuzzy as to know how Mark got in contact with me specifically, but I believe Elise had posted about her breakup online, so I offered my support publicly, and he targeted me. It all began on New Year's Eve. He started messaging me on Instagram over and over, threatening me, etc. I was having a get-together with my then boyfriend, 2 of my now ex-best friends, and my now ex-best friend's boyfriend. I remember seeing my notifications blowing up and ignoring them, but everyone else seemed more concerned than I was. I brushed it off until late the next day, when I checked my phone, and I had dozens of DMs from Mark, as well as a few public posts that he'd tagged Elise and I in, calling us every name in the book, and claiming I was the reason they'd broken up. I answered his DMs, asking why he was targeting me, and that, as it turns out, was the biggest mistake I ever made. After some angry messages from him, he blocked me, and I thought it was all over. I also had some missed calls from Elise, so I finally contacted her and asked what was going on. She frantically told me that Mark was a dangerous man, and that he'd been tormenting her since the day they'd become a couple. He would throw her around his apartment, leaving awful bruises that she sent me photos of, and he would threaten to commit suicide if she left him. He even threw a hissy fit at the tattoo shop, because they wouldn't tattoo Elise's first and middle name over his eyebrow. He got Crybaby instead. Fitting. Elise also informed me that Mark had been in jail before getting together with her for domestic abuse. He'd stabbed his ex-girlfriend in the leg and was only behind bars for a month before his dad bailed him out. With this new information, I was terrified. Elise told me where he lived, and it was directly behind the coffee shop I'd mentioned earlier. I frequented that building and that part of town in general, and that'll come into play later. I eventually calmed myself down and forgot about him. That is until he got my phone number. I still don't know how he got it, but I woke up to 30+ messages from him one day and was horrified. His messages included threats to kill himself if I didn't help him and Elise get back together, threats to kill me, cries for help, then him blocking my number and then unblocking it just to start the cycle all over again. I, being very naive and not wanting to be held responsible if he actually did kill himself, didn't block him. I asked him to leave me alone, and if he wanted a number to a hotline where he could get some help, but he just pretended to calm down for a bit. I gave him the number after many messages from him saying how much he missed Elise, but at the same time he also wanted to kill her. I told her about it immediately and pushed her to go to the police, but she didn't. He'd conditioned her to believe that she would get in trouble if she reported him. This went on for months. I usually didn't respond, and when I did, he seemed to chill out for a bit. Fast forward to a particular night where Elise and I were hanging out at my house. We were chatting away when my phone started to light up. I ignored it and kept talking because I didn't want to be rude, and Elise peeked at my phone and said, "It's Mark, look." And sure enough, Mark was bombing my phone with threats to slit his own throat because he knew Elise was at my house. He called us both the C-word and claimed it would be our fault if he died that night. I didn't answer, but what came next is something that still haunts me to this day. He sent a video. Being curious, I opened it, with Elise watching over my shoulder. The video was of Mark's arm with a huge gash going down the middle. He was fake crying in the background and saying, "You made me do this. I hate you both." And he clenched his fist over and over again to make more blood gush out. Elise and I were so in shock that we watched the entire 50-second clip, despite how disturbing it was. I immediately called our local police station, and Elise gave them his address. Then an officer came to my house to view the video and take down some notes. While we waited for the police to arrive, Mark had posted the gruesome video to his Instagram and had unblocked Elise and I just to tag us in it, claiming we'd told him to do it. Being a conventionally attractive guy with an e-boy aesthetic, the girls that swooned over him commented some pretty harsh things about us and kissed his ass like crazy. He was admitted to the hospital that night, and I wish they'd kept him in as the harassment continued the second he got out. Time travelling a little more now to a few months later, and Mark hadn't let up, and Elise and I were still very close. We had another friend, Kayla, visiting from across the country, and she had also had a run-in online with Mark and hated him. But she wasn't afraid of him. She was always carrying more than one weapon, some pepper spray, and she knew how to fight. So she suggested we go take a walk in the part of town that he lived in. She wanted to visit that coffee shop, to see some of the small businesses, and then grab dinner at a pizzeria. Elise and I reluctantly agreed. We parked in front of the coffee shop, grabbed some drinks and started walking down the road. Within about 5 minutes, Mark drove by on his motorcycle as Elise and Kayla were immersed in conversation and I trailed behind. I looked up and made eye contact with Mark and Elise, and Kayla noticed him as he was speeding off. Kayla assured us he wouldn't get anywhere near us with her around, so we kept on walking. Mark began circling the block that we were walking on with his bike, and as we crossed to the next block, he switched to that block and circled it too. On the third block was the pizza place. Their walls are all glass, all see-through of course, so we went in and were seated in the corner right next to the glass. We sat there for about an hour and a half, eating, talking and sipping on soda, with Mark circling the restaurant the entire time. We did our best to ignore him, and once we were finished and got up to leave, Mark sped off and we didn't see him again that evening. Some time passed, and Mark began riding by Elise's house every night. Within a week, he'd started doing the same to me. I told my parents and my stepfather, who kept a close eye on our street, and my mum always made sure our doors and windows were locked and the shades were shut, etc., before going to bed. My dad would even do a nightly patrol, where he would drive around my street for a few minutes on his way home from work, since he no longer lived there. He would call me and let me know that the coast was clear as he was leaving, but I still woke up almost every night to the sound of his motorcycle engine revving outside of my house. We had no proof of this to show to the police, though, because he was somehow doing this without a trace, so we didn't bother reporting it. At the end of 2017, Mark took his motorcycle and sped off to California to avoid the legal trouble he'd gotten into here. Elise and I were relieved, to say the least. He still harassed us from time to time, but he never came back, and we stopped hearing from him after a while and thought nothing of it. Fast forward one last time to September of 2019. Elise and I were out and about, enjoying the sunshine, when she got a phone call. Mark was dead. He had died right after his calls and messages to us stopped. He got into it with his new drug dealer in Arizona and pissed them off enough for them to shoot him. He died instantly. He also got 2 more domestic violence charges in California and Arizona and was on the run from his warrant. His father told everyone it was an accidental overdose because Mark was known for abusing Xanax and other miscellaneous drugs, but it was just to cover his sociopathic son's ass. I'm not sure if Mark's death was his karma or some higher being protecting us and all of the girls he's hurt before and would hurt in the future. But he's gone. We never have to worry about our safety because of him ever again. Although seeing photos of him does still give me the creeps. Mark, I don't know where you are, but this world is better off without people like you. I'm so glad you're gone. Let's never, ever meet again.
I was once featured in a St. Jude Survivors newsletter when I was about 5 years old in the early 90s. The newsletter went out across the country and apparently into Canada. There was this guy named Mitchell that called my family up out of the blue because he had read my cancer survival story. He lived somewhere in Canada and claimed to be this big-time Christian and wanted to talk to me about God and prayer. My mum let him talk to me for whatever reason, and the guy actually just wanted to talk to me about Alf, the TV show. This Canadian dude's name was Mitchell, and was obsessed with Alf, and somehow got a hold of our mailing address and sent me a ton of Alf merchandise, coloring books, pencils, you name it. For some reason, my parents let him talk to me whenever he would call, because they bought into his God stuff and liked how he sent me free things. This went on for about a year, until he asked me if I'd ever heard of John Wayne Gacy. He told me who he was, and that he had escaped Gacy when he tried kidnapping him. This happened when the man was a kid. He told me that I should tell my parents that they shouldn't trust strangers, because you never know who you could really be talking to. He didn't sound menacing when he said it, just matter of fact. Of course, my parents freaked out when I told them that, and they decided to change numbers and called the police. But as the guy lived in Canada and hadn't really threatened me, nothing could be done. Keep in mind, Mitchell somehow had our mailing address and knew exactly where we lived. We had plans on moving anyway, though. Fast forward 10 years to 2001. We live in a new house, in a new state. Everything is unlisted. I'm 15, and I receive in the mail an ALF colouring book.
So I'm 5'3", 115 pounds, so I guess I'm pretty small. That's my reasoning for being very submissive over all of what I'm about to tell you. When I started working at this fast food chain, I was 16. It was my first job, and I was excited to finally take my first steps into adulthood. There was this co-worker of mine that was training me, and for privacy purposes, I'm going to call him Frank. Now, Frank at first glance looks young, 19, 21 at the most. We got along, and nothing wasn't too bad or alarming. Light conversations about anime and such. I remember things started to change slightly when he was talking about a video game character, and none of our co-workers knew who it was. When I saw the green hat character, I said, "Oh, that's Link. How cute. I used to watch my brother play Legend of Zelda 4 Swords." He looked at me and said, "Marry me." I laughed it off and continued on with my day. For the rest of my shift, he would hover over me, asking me personal questions like my age, favourite things, etc. Now, being the open, friendly person I was, I answered happily. I told him how I loved butterflies and that I was 16. I'm 17 now and have had several jobs since, but when an older man asks for your age as a minor, it's never a good sign. Moving on to December, I've been at this chain for a month now. My manager asked me if I wanted to come to their company's Secret Santa party, and I agreed. When the day came, I arrived with my now ex-best friend. And Frank arrives on the phone acting busy, but I thought nothing of it. During the whole party, he was on the phone. I was getting food when he tapped my shoulder, still on the phone, and handed me a beautiful butterfly necklace. I didn't know what to say besides thanking him, thinking he was my Secret Santa. Then later, my other co-worker comes up to me, handing me a card to Starbucks and a plush. I asked why, and she said she was my Secret Santa. I thought it must have been a mistake and went on with my night, listening to my old best friend tell me how I should date Frank, which in my mind was never on the table. January rolls around, and it was Frank's birthday. We were just working, until I heard one of my girl co-workers, who was into him at the time, wish him a happy birthday. Now, being that person, I wished him a happy birthday too, while my other co-worker asks how old he's turning. He said 27. And just to note, that every shift I worked with him, he would take several photos of me before and after my shift, commenting on my hair, my skin and my eyes. He often said how cute my nose was too. Again, not wanting to cause a scene, I just laughed everything off. That's always the case, isn't it? We don't want to cause a scene. I did start telling him to please stop, but of course he wouldn't, no matter how many times I asked him to. Fast forward to May, my birthday month, and of course I was working on my birthday. I went to the back door as usual. Due to COVID, I had to ring the doorbell and wait for someone to open the door. When out of nowhere, Frank pops out of the bushes, handing me all kinds of gifts. Today was his day off, so I was generally confused. I remember thinking, how the hell did he know my birthday? I never talk about it since I don't like celebrating it. He followed me around for a few minutes before awkwardly leaving, when I apologized that I want to get to work and not get yelled at. Once July came, I had finally found a new job. I quit due to sexual harassment that I had to endure for 9 months that I worked there from my shift lead. That's a whole other story. But when a man starts getting handsy, I don't laugh it off, I shut it down. It got really bad when that ex-best friend that I had mentioned earlier started showing all my co-workers, including Frank, and that shift lead, explicit photos of me that she'd stolen off my phone without me knowing. I was very insecure at the time and was in an abusive relationship, so I would give anything this boy asked of me. At that point, I had just about had it. After being interrogated about that shift lead, I put in my 2 weeks. On my last week, everyone was talking about how that shift lead got laid off for sexual harassment. Frank and I were doing dishes and the topic came up. I awkwardly told him about it, now knowing how everyone knew my story anyway. The shift lead would often grab my ass, rub my thigh, talk about my boobs and about how if they were bigger, and things he would do to my body, etc., etc. I would say stop politely, but he would continue. When I started yelling and saying stop more assertively, he would often make me do humiliating tasks like clean the greasy floors on my hands and knees, or clean the dining room when it was closed due to COVID. When I told Frank this, he shrugged it off and said that was no reason for him to be fired. I remember being absolutely shocked, retorting, "I'm just glad I'm leaving this hellhole," and left it at that. A month into my new job as a hostess, everything was going well. It's a restaurant, but everyone just comes there to drink, so it's more of a bar. On one of my 2 a.m. shifts, Frank stops by on his bike. I tried to be friendly, but was getting frustrated when he kept cutting me off from talking to other people. I then walked away to bus tables because no one else would do it, and he couldn't follow me into the restaurant. And after bussing all the tables, I come up to the counter to see my co-workers giggling. "What's happening?" I asked. The other hostesses smiled. "That's so cute how your boyfriend takes photos of you while you're working. And it's cute how obsessive he is over you. He wouldn't stop talking about you to us." Boyfriend? I was and still happily remained single after that bullcrap of a relationship. The only person they could be referring to was Frank. Then it dawned on me. How the hell did he know where I was working and my shift schedule? I didn't tell anyone besides my parents and my brother. A week goes by and Frank comes back. I may have gotten a little overdramatic, but I didn't know what else to do. I told the other host at the counter to tell him I'm not working today and dashed inside. I told my manager that this man, Frank, keeps taking photos of me as I'm working and it's making me uncomfortable. My manager told me to stay in the back room while he went and handled the situation. Now our restaurant is very popular in the area, so it's very crowded in the front. Frank, with his bike, was blocking customers, and that's what my manager was telling him. My idiotic ass was popping my head up a little under the back room window, where I could see what was going on in the front. I freaked out a little when I saw Frank get aggressive with my manager. He began thrashing when my manager tried to lead him out to the front. Suddenly, Frank throws his bike and tries heading into the building. A few male waiters see what's happening and were informed by my manager. I remembered one waiter standing in the back room with me, watching the door, as another was practically fighting with Frank. I could only hear yelling outside the door, and then it went very quiet. I spent the rest of my shift like that, cleaning silverware with that male server. From then on, people would walk me to my car, even if it was broad daylight. From August to November, he would be on his bike, passing by the restaurant from a distance. He would just be watching and taking photos for 10 to 20 minutes before leaving. Now the reason I thought of putting this here was now it's been a little more intense, besides just the looking from a distance. Due to COVID, I'm not needed anymore, because now my restaurant is takeout only. I've been working seasonal jobs while working at the restaurant, but now I'm not working, and I'm waiting to get my schedule. Because I was bored this day, I drove to my local mall just to do a little Christmas shopping. While driving, I looked in my rearview mirror to see a recognizable face. It was Frank. I practically choked on spit seeing his face in my mirror. I tried not to get the best of myself and knocked it off as a coincidence. Yeah, it wasn't. He'd followed me throughout the mall, then later followed me as I was driving home. Now no one knows where I live besides that old friend, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I drove for an hour, getting lost and taking every random turn I could until I lost him. I now believe this is how he would track me down. My car isn't common, but it doesn't stand out too much either. I've rarely left my house since. It's now January 2021, and ever since the start of this new year, and I've been getting weird phone calls. When I answer it and say hello, all I can hear is breathing, and then the call ends. Along with that, I've gotten many random messages asking about gifts and delivering me them. I'm not one who usually uses social media, but these messages were all over mine. All of them were from newly made accounts across Snapchat and Instagram. On one occasion, an account started sending me photos that I'd never sent to anyone. These photos were photos of my cat that I had saved in my Snapchat album. It was just photo after photo of things I've never sent, and ending with, "I have a gift for you." I deleted both apps along with deleting almost everything off my phone. A week ago I downloaded Snapchat again due to some dumb assignment my teacher wanted us to do, when one of my old co-workers sent me a message. It read, "Frank wants to give you your Christmas gift. Want to stop by?" Now maybe I'm just overreacting, or maybe those accounts were Frank. I just want to say my personality has changed because of all of this. I am very protective now, rarely talk to anyone, especially not as friendly as I did then. It's only been a little over a year, yet I feel like I've aged 10.
Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate you guys tuning in every other day. It really is awesome. Thank you. I don't say it often enough, but I'm so grateful to each and every one of you that always tunes in. You guys are the best. So, I hope you liked Miss Fearsome. I've invited her back because I know that a lot of you really like her stuff and like her voice, so it's good to get positive collaboration reinforcement. To anyone who's checked out my Ko-fi page, or Ko-fi, however you pronounce it, my wife and I are actually launching a little series on there. It's called Get to Know Mort, where we laugh and chat, and it's just 5 questions about, random stuff. And she asks me, I answer it. I like it. And if you've donated to Ko-fi in the last 30 days, you can actually check that out for free. So, go ahead, my dear Ko-fi supporters. Probably be launching on Patreon as well for all you amazing patrons. So yeah, extra perks. There you go. Feel free to check it out. But yeah, it's I think it's certainly interesting and fun if you want to see that. A huge thanks as always to my members and supporters from Patreon and Ko-fi. Your names are on screen. You guys are the best, and I seriously appreciate you. Okay then, well I think that is it for now. I am going to start editing this, and yeah, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.